Let's work on the update and artifact API endpoint. In this case, the client is making an HTTP put request and passing two things to the server side. One is a path parameter indicating which artifact we want to modify. The second one is the updated artifact in the request body. It looks like the update operation is a combination of find artifact by ID and add artifact. Here is the successful response. As you can see, it is very similar to the successful response of add artifact. It also has a bad request response. If the artifact ID provided by this put request does not exist in the database, then the server will return this 404 response. Let's toggle over to IntelliJ. First, let's create a handler method in the artifact controller to handle this put request. Public result update artifact. In this case, let's use add put mapping. The URL will be API v1 artifacts artifact ID. So the URL of this put request is the same as the URL of find artifact by ID. But also, this put mapping here has a request body that contains the artifact JSON object with updated name, description, and image URL. Then how do we retrieve the three updated values from the request body and put them in an artifact object? Here, we can define two formal parameters. One is used to hold the artifact ID, the path parameter, and the other one, which is of type artifact DTO, can hold the three updated values, name, description, and image URL. So let's do that. String artifact ID artifact DTO artifact DTO. But this is not enough. We have to annotate the first formal parameter using add path variable. Now in this case, make sure the name of the formal parameter and the name of the path parameter, they match. Now for the second formal parameter, we can use add request body. Since we already know we're going to validate the three values, name, description, and image URL, to make sure they're not empty. So let's add valid annotation here. Okay, just like what we did for add artifact. Then the controller delegates to the artifact service object. So let's go to here and define an update method in the artifact service class. Public artifact update. Now, this update method takes two parameters. Number one is string artifact ID. And the second one will be the update, the artifact with the updated information. Next, let's create a test method for this update method. at test update success. And we're going to follow given, when, and then. First, we need to create a fake artifact data that represents an existing artifact in the database. That is the artifact we're trying to update. Let's call this old artifact. Let me copy some data from previous test cases. So let's copy the invisibility cloak. Okay. Next, we need to create an artifact object that contains the updated information or the updates. So let's call it artifact update. So the information in this update is provided by the front end. So let me copy this. Now let's change the description to a new description. We only modified the description. Name, image are the same. And we cannot modify the ID because the ID is the primary key in the database. So here we can either have this or not have this. Not big deal. We're not going to update this ID. All right. Next, let's define the behavior of the mock object, artifact repository. So let's think about update. Update is a little tricky. The way update works is that you need to first find this existing artifact from the database, in this case, old artifact, and then modify this old artifact's content. For example, in this case, we're going to update the description to a new description. And finally, we're going to use artifact repository to save the modified version back to the database. In this case, we're going to save the old artifact with updated value back to the database. So in summary, update is really two steps. Step 1, find by ID. Step 2, save the modified version. That means we need to mock two behaviors. The behavior of find by ID and the behavior of save. Let's do that. Given artifact repository dot find by ID. In this case, it's this ID. It will return this old artifact. So it's found. But apparently, this repository cannot just return the old artifact. We have to wrap it in an optional. Okay. Next, let's define the behavior of save. Given artifact repository dot save. Remember, we need to save the modified old artifact back to the database. So we're still going to save old artifact. And this will return the old artifact. Because when we return it, this artifact already has the updated values. Okay. All right, next, let's move on to when. Artifact service dot update. we're going to pass in the ID and this update. And let's call this updated artifact. Now in the then step, let's first compare, assert that updated artifact dot get ID is equal to this number here. Then we're going to assert that updated artifact dot get description, because that's the modified value here, dot is equal to update dot get description. Okay, so let's make it consistent. Update dot get ID. Let's also verify the find by ID is executed exactly once, and the save method is also executed exactly once. So let me copy from here. Let's start the test case. And it fails because of the null pointer exception. Next, let's implement this update method in artifact service. Based on our previous analysis and also the test case, we need to first find by ID. Once we find this artifact, then we're going to modify this artifact based on the provided update artifact. Okay, so first, this dot artifact repository dot find by ID, and we're going to pass artifact ID to it. Now remember, this one only returns us the optional, so we have to use get. And then we're going to assign it to a variable, which is artifact. Okay, let's call this old artifact. Next, let's update this old artifact. Old artifact dot set name to update dot get name, because we do not know which field is changed, so we have to update all of them. In this case, name is not changed, so we're still using the same old name. Set description update dot get description. Old artifact dot set image URL update dot get image URL. Okay, once this is done, our second step is to use this dot artifact repository dot save. We're going to save the modified old artifact back to the database. So here is old artifact. And we're going to call this updated artifact. And let's return it to the controller. Okay. Later on, we'll consider the scenario of not finding this artifact. But for now, let's just focus on the happy path. Okay. Let's launch the test case again and see if it will pass. Okay, it passed. Very good. Next, let's consider the unhappy path, which is what if the provided ID does not exist? Let's create another test case. At test void test update not found. This time is pretty simple. In the given, we only need to prepare the update object. That is this one. So this is the artifact that passed to service.update. Okay. But we also have to define the behavior of find by ID. Given artifact repository.find by ID. And in this case, this is the ID. In this case, since this ID is invalid, doesn't exist, so let me get rid of it. This time it will return an empty optional. Okay. What should we do if find by ID returns an empty optional? Once the artifact service finds out the returned artifact from the repository is null, it should throw an artifact not found exception instead of keep processing it. This is very similar to test find by ID not found test case. That in this case, we're expecting an artifact not found exception to be thrown. And here is the syntax. Assert throws artifact not found exception dot class, and then we're going to pass the second argument, which is a lambda expression. Artifact service dot update. So in this case, we're expecting an exception is thrown. If the exception is not thrown, then this test case will fail. And of course, here we can verify that the find by ID is called at least once. Okay, so let's run the test case. And it fails. Because here, we're expecting artifact not found exception, but the actual exception is no such element exception. Now let's refactor our update. In this case, we have to consider the unhappy path. That is, what if we cannot find anything? Yes, we have to use something called dot or else throw. But let me show you a trick of how to put everything here in one statement using Fluent interface. So let me select those, cut, and let's get rid of this .get. Okay, instead of using .get, let's use .map. And let me break the line here. Map is expecting a lambda expression. So basically it means if this old artifact is found, here is how we process it. Paste. And let me move these two lines from here to here. Or else throw also a lambda expression, new artifact not found exception. And we're going to pass this non-existent ID. And let's get rid of this. Just return it. There we go. And we can even get rid of this. Just return it. Okay, make it shorter. Good. So this one statement means find by ID. If found, here is how we process old artifact. So we update name, description, and image URL, and then save it back to the database. If not found, then this update will throw an exception, artifact not found exception. Let's execute this test case to see if it passes. Let me put this side by side so you can compare. Okay. And it passed. Very good. Next, let's work on the test method for the controller. So let's create a test method for this update artifact handler method at test void test update artifact success. And let's follow the given. Here will be when and then together. Okay. So in given, we need to prepare some fake data for the mock MVC put request. That is, we need to create an instance of artifact DTO record and then serialize it using Jackson and give that JSON string to mock MVC. This is very similar to test add artifact success. So let's go there and copy some code. Actually, let's copy all the code. From here all the way to here. Okay, now it's happy. Okay, so let's give an ID to this artifact DTO. And let's change this to invisibility cloak. Let's change this to updated artifact. And the same thing here. Okay, so the data of the DTO is supposed to be provided by the client side, the front end. And this updated artifact is returned from the service. So this is how we mock the behavior of the artifact service right here. Okay, copy this. Next, let's work on the when and then step. So first of all, this is a put request. And the URL should be, copy this. Content type is good, content is good, accept is good. And the flag is supposed to be true, success, and here will be update success. Again, make sure your API documentation is available. And the ID should not be changed. Use dot value. And here should be the updated artifact. Okay, it should work. So the returned value in the JSON should match this updated artifact's value. Okay. So let's launch it. And it fails because of the JSON cannot be null or empty. Okay, next, let's implement this handler method. Well, actually, it's pretty similar to add artifact. That is, first, we need to convert this DTO into artifact before we pass it to service.update. So this dot artifact DTO to artifact converter dot convert artifact DTO. So let's call this update. So this is the artifact with the updated value provided by the front end. Now next, let's call this dot artifact service dot update. We're going to pass the artifact ID and this update. And this will return the updated artifact. But we cannot return this updated artifact directly to the front end. So we're going to first this dot artifact to artifact DTO converter. First convert it to DTO. So let's call this updated artifact DTO. And then we're going to return new result. Let's make sure we know the values of the result. So true, status code dot success. And the message will be update success. And finally, the payload should be updated artifact DTO. Okay. Now let's launch this test case again and see if it passes. Oh, it failed? It says source is null, so the conversion has a problem. Okay, I wonder what is really returned here. Okay, so it's line 60. See, it returns updated artifact. Ah, this one should not be save, should be update, because the controller is going to call update, not save, right? Okay. Then here is supposed to be the ID. Okay, close this first, which is here. Okay, so let's run again. It still fails. It says invalid use of artifact matcher. So this exception may occur if matchers are combined with raw values. So where is this? Oh, this line. Okay, so this is incorrect. All right, so this is incorrect, and here is correct. All right, no problem. Just cut and use EQ and put it here. Import. All right. Now, hopefully this will work. Run test update artifacts. Okay, finally it is successful, right? All right. So testing is not easy. And remember, copy and paste is dangerous. Now, our last test case would be the unhappy path. That is, what if the ID does not exist? Okay. So let's come down here, add test, void test update artifact arrow with non-existent ID. So usually you can give a pretty long name to the test case. It doesn't matter. Make sure this is human readable so we know what exactly you are testing. It's always common to have pretty long name as the test method name. So let's copy and paste from the previous test case. I know copy and paste is dangerous, but I promise I will be very cautious this time. Okay, so first make it happy, add exception. In this case, let's assume that this invisibility cloak does not exist. Okay, and we don't need this because we're not going to return anything. So this time, if artifact service.update gets called, instead of return, it will throw new artifact not found exception. And let's copy this non-existent ID. Okay, at least in this test case, it doesn't exist. And let's get rid of this. And also, no. This should be dot is empty. Okay. Again, make sure your API documentation is available. So this will be false. And this will be dot not found. The value of the message should be, if memory serves me right, could not find artifact with ID, copy, paste. You can easily copy this from the API documentation. Set face. All right, let's start this test case. And fails. Let's say expected is could not find artifact with ID why they're not the same. Oh, I should be uppercase. Okay, that's easy to fix. And run again. It passed. We don't have to make any modification to the handler method in the controller because remember, once a controller throws an exception, in this case, artifact not found exception, this right here, this exception handler advice, move it here, this will kick in and return a result that says not found and also the error message, okay? But does not provide a payload. That's why the payload is empty or null in this case. In the end, let's do some testing using Postman. So first, let me close those and let's launch the entire project. Okay, so it's running. And let's toggle over to Chrome. Let's access H2 database. Localhost 8080 H2-console. And every time we have to copy the new URL, that's pretty tedious. Let me show you how to set a fixed H2 URL. Okay, so let's go to resources, and here is application.properties. Now I prefer to use .yaml, so let me rename it. YML or just YAML, both are fine. So for now, let's just call it YML. Okay, so here we're gonna have some configurations for the Spring data source. Just write Spring : data source URL will be JDBC : H2 MEM. Let's just call it Hogwarts, and username will be SA. Password will be nothing. Okay? Don't write anything. And here we're going to have a driver class name is org.h2.driver. Okay. And also here, let me show you this. We can actually let Spring Data JPA, which is Hibernate behind the scenes, show the SQL that is using to create the tables or querying the table, inserting, updating, and so on and so forth. This is called JPA show SQL is true, because by default, show SQL is false. If you want to know what happened behind the scene, so you can turn on this feature and you will see some SQL statements in the chatters when you start the Spring Boot project. We'll see that later on. Okay, so let me turn it off. If you change the application file, you have to restart. Okay, so let's restart. Now pay attention to the chatters. As you can see here, Hibernate is showing the SQL it is doing for us. You can see drop table, then create table artifact, create table wizard, then select and insert the 6 artifacts we created in the command runner. In this right here in DB data initializer. Okay, you can actually learn some SQL from Hibernate. All right, then let's toggle over to H2 console. Let's just close it and do it again. Localhost 8080 H2, press enter. Okay, now this time we just need to change this to Hogwarts and SA empty connect. There we go. So from now on, we just have one fixed URL. So let's select artifact. So we have 6 artifacts, okay? And our goal is to test, update, let's say, invisibility cloak. Okay, so let me copy this ID. Let's then toggle over to Postman. So create a new request, and let's call this update an artifact. And this should be a put request, and the URL is right here. I change it to 92 here. Okay, 92. All right, save. Remember, put also needs to put a body here. The body is right here, raw JSON. So let's copy some sample data from add an artifact. By the way, you can also copy some sample data from the API documentation. Okay, so either way is fine. So this is invisibility cloak, and here is a new description, and the image URL is the same image URL. Okay, save. So everything's fine, put, and the URL looks good, raw, and okay. So let's click send. All right, it looks like update is success. Harry still has 2 artifacts. Let's toggle over to H2 console and run this SQL again. Okay, now invisibility cloak has a new description. Okay. Now next, let's test some invalid data. For example, I'm gonna clear this, and clear this. Okay, we still want to update invisibility cloak, but we're not providing any name, description, and image URL. We're supposed to get a 400 response. Okay, we got a 400 bad request. Name is required. Let's toggle over to H2 console to see that there's no modification here. So run again. Yeah. As you can see, it is still called invisibility cloak. Okay, so now we're done with update and artifact. Okay, we just finished the update and artifact API endpoint, which corresponds to the 4th user story in this issue. So let's select this, check. Next, let's work on delete an artifact. See you in the next video.